Hey everyone, and welcome to Writing Today. My name is Dewey, and in this episode I'll be talking about how you can create some really interesting and realistic dialogue in your story. And once more, before we get into the video, I want to talk about my Kindle Paperwhite giveaway. Now this is a giveaway that I'm doing to promote my second channel where I'm reading scary stories. It's called the Aurora Files. If you're interested in audio stories, then it's a channel I recommend you check out. But if it's before the 18th of August 2023, then I recommend you also check out my giveaway. Because if you subscribe in this time and after entering this giveaway, you stand a chance to win the Kindle Paperwhite. And I'd like to say that the entries so far have been fantastic. With over 300 entries so quickly, YouTube's a little bit scared. So you need to make sure that you have actually subscribed to the channel. It is an essential part of this giveaway, and if you want to win this Kindle Paperwhite, you've got to guarantee your chances by making sure you've hit that subscribe button and also hit the bell. And I'd like to thank those who have subscribed to my main channel here and watched my videos over the years. I truly hope that my videos have been informative and have helped you write your dream story. With that said, let's get straight into the video with the very first tip. Tip number 1 is to eavesdrop on life. You'll be surprised how much you can learn from listening to people and their conversations. It can be your friends or family or just strangers on the street. Listening to the way they speak to each other will help you form better realistic dialogue. After all, when it comes to writing realistic dialogue, we often end up writing what we think sounds best. And what that ends up being is narration with quotation marks. And that isn't realistic and believable speech. When we are writing a novel, what we are mostly seeing is our own speech, and that can translate to all the characters that you are writing. And the last thing you want is for your characters to sound the same, with only slight personality quirks. And it's hard to be conscious of your characters' different speeches if you aren't conscious about you using your own voice and not other voices within your story. And that's why I recommend eavesdropping as a writer in real life. If you can be conscious of how a person is speaking and why they are saying the words in that way, you have a better time creating unique speech throughout your story. Be comfortable with these other voices, because when you are writing dialogue and you're fixing things to make things seem right, you might just end up making everybody sound the same. You might be putting your speech into the story and not the character's speech. And trust me when I say that this is a tough problem to get a grip on. It's certainly something I've struggled with a lot in the past. But it is something that is necessary if you want to make sure your characters' personalities are emphasized by their dialogue. And that brings us to tip 2 rather smoothly, because we need to get a good grip on our characters. Now that we've become conscious of seeing our own voice in our writing, it's now time to look at our characters and their personalities and how we can convey their personality in speech. Well, this is rather simple if you've done a lot of planning for your novel. Simply take a look at the characters and their backstory. What kind of family did they grow up with? What part of the world are they from? And finally, what is the core of their personality? This is something that needs to be a bit more generalized to help you better understand the dialogue. For example, if they are the stoic type, then they'll keep a lot of information to themselves. Their sentences will be shorter and punchier, and a lot of the information that they could be sharing they won't. Then you've got the more soft-spoken types, who tend to answer a lot of questions verbosely, but at the same time, they're not doing it aggressively. So they'll try to be more polite, they'll try to use a lot more euphemisms, but when somebody is a tough guy, they'll simply forget all about that and say things the way they want to say them, especially depending on their mood. One method I recommend to help you figure out these distinctive voices is to place yourself in their shoes and act it out. Really bring out the thespian inside of you and try and figure out how they would say things, what gestures would they make. Try to pull the voices if you can. Getting into the right mentality that matches up with your character can be tough, but it can also be fun. You can do this by yourself, or you can include friends or family if you want to make it a group effort. But this is certainly one way I recommend getting those distinctive voices in your dialogue. Tip number 3 is showing the emotions of your character rather than telling. Now, a character saying they're angry is one thing, but you can show it in their dialogue choice and their actions. And a lot of writers tend to forget that the actions of the character can help emphasize the dialogue a lot better than the words can. So for example, you've created an interesting dialogue. The characters are having an argument, for example. And when they're having this argument, they're exchanging things like, I am angry, well I'm upset too, da 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 da. And that's okay, but the words don't really match up. It's more like you're telling them what they're feeling rather than showing it in their words. For example, you can make it a lot better if the two characters are insulting each other or they're bringing up tense moments. It makes it feel a lot more real. And then look at the expressions and the gestures that the characters make. They help underline their emotions. Sure, you can say a character said something sadly, or they were unhappy when they said it, but that's once more telling them, not showing them. You can talk about how the spark left their eyes when they delivered bad news, or you can talk about the way that they frowned, the way their shoulders were slumped down. Things like that can certainly help convey that emotion. And that's just expressions. The gestures themselves can also be included. For example, if your character is working with something on a table, they might be flustered, confused, they might be fumbling around, dropping things. But if they are a bit more coordinated, their moves are a lot more graceful. This emphasizes their mentality in that moment during the conversation. For example, if they are having an argument with someone, and somebody is throwing wild hand gestures, but the other one is calmly arguing back and forth while doing something a bit more intricate, it conveys to the reader that one character is a lot more calm and assured in what they're arguing about, where the other one is a lot more flustered, and they're trying their best to hammer home their argument through their arm movements. These non-verbal cues can really help a dialogue along. And sure, you don't need to include them all, your characters don't always have to be doing something. But certainly for more important conversations, they can help display how the characters are truly feeling without you explicitly telling the reader how they're feeling. Tip number 4 is for those out there who want to create realistic dialogue but don't have any interruptions. Smooth dialogue happens most of the time, that's fine. But certainly more realistic dialogue, there are going to be some interruptions. A character might lose their patience listening to another character speak, interrupt, yell over them, try to get their points across. Or they could all be interrupted by something that's a bit more dangerous, let's say the introduction of an antagonist or a threat, or something a lot more important needing their attention. And these overlaps and interruptions will certainly make your dialogue feel a lot more dynamic and realistic. The world doesn't feel like it's on pause, it feels like stuff is going on. So your characters don't always get through a conversation. And finally, tip 5 is all about trimming the excess dialogue and making sure all your conversations are purposeful. Nobody likes to read some small talk in a story. It needs to develop the characters or develop the plot. If it doesn't do either, then it's pointless. You simply don't want to include a dialogue just to have a break from your narration. The same can be said about repetition. If you're going to be repeating your dialogue throughout your story, and you're often telling the same details over and over and over again, while it may be new to the characters, to the reader it is not. And this is simply padding, it's repetitive, it's annoying. And the final method that I recommend for trimming the excess dialogue is simply not including dialogue in some sequences. Often we feel that when two characters meet, or an antagonist and protagonist are in a clash, we want to force some dialogue into the sequence because that's what we see in movies and series. But that's not always the case. Some situations are a lot more tense, requires a lot of the character's attention. And it's all about action, not dialogue. Not every character is built like Spider-Man, who has a quip for every situation at any moment. So in some situations, make sure your characters truly struggle to find the words, so instead they decide to focus on what they need to do rather than what they can say. Once more, this is another step towards realistic and impactful dialogue. It's knowing when to speak and knowing when not to speak. And that brings us to the end of this video. We've talked about dialogue a few times before and how to make it a bit more clear to the reader who is speaking, especially in situations where there are a bunch of characters speaking with each other. But we've never really talked about how we can improve the dialogue to make sure the characters stand out and that the reader feels that the dialogue is believable as well. So I do hope that these tips help you out. But with that said, while we're on the subject of making sure we're clear who is speaking in the story, we need to make sure we include the proper tags for every dialogue. When we have a back and forth between two characters, we can drop the tags and just know that every time the dialogue quotations change to someone else, it's that person speaking. But every time that back and forth is broken, we need to include a new tag about who is speaking, and then reintroduce the other tags of who's speaking next. But that's an entirely different conversation, and I could spend a lot of time talking about the different variations. For now, I hope that helps you out. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you want to check out the Kindle Paperwhite giveaway, there's a link to it at the top of the description. Of course, there's also a link to the channel if you want to check that out straight away. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. With that, good day, good night, and happy writing.